To many Southerners, the coup was a welcome end to Northern domination. To many Northerners, meanwhile, it seemed a prelude to the Igbo domination they had long feared. 4 of the 5 majors who led the coup were Igbo, reason why some people prefer to call the Civil War an Igbo coup. In the first year of independence, Ahmadu Bello's Northern People's Congress ruled Nigeria in coalition with Nnamdi Azikiwe's National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroon Party. However, by 1963, the coalition has begun to fragment, with Obafemi Awolowo's Action Group Party now visually disseminated and Awo imprisoned for treason. Bello and his MPC colleagues knew they had a ready southern partner in the new political boss of the West, Samuel Akintola, the region's premier. This emboldened MPC's northern politicians, many of who had never liked Igbos in the first place, to start treating NCNC politicians as irrelevant. As a result of their lowly status in governing coalition, the experience of the 1962 to 1963 census fiasco and upcoming federal elections in 1964. NCC thus decided to team up with what was left of its former bitter rival, AG, as well as with some northern minorities to form the United Progressive Grand Alliance. UPGA presented itself as an alternative to Hausa Fulani domination of the federal government. Its main goal was to wrest control of the center from NPC, rendering the stakes high for Bello's party, which faced potential national-level marginalization if UPGA triumphed. Bello announced his party would have no further dealings of any sort with NCNC because the Igbos have never been true friends of the North and will never be, according to him. Predictably, he joined forces with Akintola's new political vehicle, the Nigerian National Democratic Party, and a few other small southern parties to form the Nigerian National Alliance. NNA's objective was simple: maintain the status quo at the center with Bello's MPC in charge and a junior southern coalition partner. The 1964 federal election was characterized by ethnic baiting and electoral malpractices of all sorts. In 1964, the Times editorial described the campaign thus: "Party manifestos have long since been forgotten in the heat of the battle. The overwhelming emphasis laid by all campaigners on tribal and regional dispute and prejudice indicates the real point at issue. The Northerners are concentrating their fire on fears of everyone else of Igbo domination. Win Yorubas of Western region by playing on their dislike of the Igbos and arguing that victory for Akintola's NNDP would ensconce Yoruba influence in the government, whereas votes for the action group merely tied the divided Yoruba people to the chariot wheel of Igbo aggrandizement." At a rally in October 1964, Bello said NCNC wanted Igbos to dominate the rest after the breakdown of the MPC-NCNC coalition. Igbo thus resumed their role as the primary enemy of the North. Using their power at the federal level, Bello's NNA deployed intimidation tactics against UPGA politicians who were sometimes physically prevented from entering the North to campaign or even being able to register their candidacy. Meanwhile, in the West, Akintola put in place the machinery required to rig the election on behalf of NNA. Commenting on the 1964 campaign in the West, reports had it that an unpopular Akintola-led government, regarded by many people as stooge of the North, must try to cajole or threaten the population to vote for it. A system of creating private armies of thugs under the name of party stalwarts is in place. They are on the payroll of the party, they are mobilized, and they are armed with knives and guns. Their job is to break up rival party meetings and intimidate the population in general. Talks beat up opposition leaders or members methodically. It is public knowledge how the elections are to be rigged. Voters are instructed not to put their ballot papers in the ballot box but to hide them. They are told to hand the papers to the head of their compounds. He, in turn, is expected to deliver all the ballot papers of his compound to a party official who would then put several hundred papers into the government box. Ultimately, 88 of 174 seats were declared unopposed in the north after local officials hindered the registration of UPGA candidates. Meanwhile, Akintola declared 30% of seats in the west unopposed using similar tactics. Frustrated, Southern UPGA leaders called for a boycott of the election. However, voting went ahead in many places and NNA declared victory. Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa called on Azikiwe, Nigerian's ceremonial president since it became a constitutional republic in 1963, to invite the creation of a government. Zik refused at first due to the events surrounding the election. Ultimately, he relented and the Bello-led NNA claimed 198 of 301 seats in the Federal Assembly, going on to form a national government. However, many southern politicians did not accept what they considered a sham of an election. The Western Regional election of 1965 followed a similar pattern to the 1964 national poll. Akintola's NNDP party deployed blatant ethnic baiting, stating that if elected, they would make sure Yorubas shall never be slaves. Which implies the opposite might be the case if UPGA, which had many Igbo politicians, won power in the West. Again, everything was done to hinder the registration of UPGA candidates. After the votes, both sides declared victory. UPGA leaders were arrested for disregarding the official results. Subsequently, Western Nigeria became a battle zone with widespread riots and clashes with police. And by now, many Nigerians were fed up with the political system. It was in this atmosphere of chaos and violence that the January 1966 coup was launched. Its leaders assassinated those they held primarily responsible for the 1964 and 1965 election fiascos. NPC leader Ahmadu Bello, Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa, and Premier Samuel Akintola, amongst others. But the coup ultimately failed because the plotters failed to seize the capital, Lagos. In effect, the highest-ranking military officer at that time, Major General Aguiyi-Ironsi, took over as head of state. No top Igbo politician was killed while the North's two most important leaders, Bello and Balewa, were assassinated. President Azikiwe happened to be abroad during the coup for medical reasons, an explanation many Northerners doubted. Instead, they believed that because he was Igbo, Zik had been warned about the coup and hence left the country. An Igbo, Ironsi was now head of state. Further aggravating Northerners in the subsequent months was the fact that though the coup leaders had been arrested, Ironsi seemed in no hurry to try them for treason. All this in combination with some of Ironsi's decisions led Northern officers to start plotting a revenge coup, what would become known as the July Remarch. The Aburi Accord of 1966 marked a pivotal moment in the lead-up to the Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafran War. Over the course of 2 days, delegates convened at the invitation of Ghana's former leader, Nkrumah, to address the crisis sparked by the assassination of head of state, General Aguiyi-Ironsi. The discussions were meticulously recorded by Ghanaian hosts and later shared with Ojukwu and Gowon. Ojukwu, representing the East, raised concerns about an arms build-up by the federal military government predominantly composed of northern elements. He cited evidence of arms acquisition concentrated in Kaduna, prompting a call for an agreement on the use of force resolution. In response, Gowon acknowledged a shortage of arms since assuming office and implied a veiled threat regarding any potential escalation of violence. The accord also delved into the reorganization of the Nigerian army, with proposals suggesting regional deployments of personnel amidst debates over the legitimacy of central government and Gowon's authority. Ojukwu emerged with a draft resolution advocating against the use of force and halting arms importation until grievances were addressed. Ojukwu's objectives at Aburi included the reformation of the Nigerian constitution, pushing for a move towards confederation. Despite the meeting's inconclusiveness, both sides agreed to a slight decentralization. However, interpretations of the accord diverged, setting the stage for conflict. Following Ojukwu's declaration of the Republic of Biafra on May 30, 1967, tensions escalated into open warfare. Despite prolonged resistance and humanitarian crisis, Biafran forces surrendered in 1970, with Ojukwu seeking refuge in Côte d'Ivoire. The conflict's toll was devastating, with estimates suggesting up to 1 million casualties. Despite swift reconstruction efforts fueled by oil revenue, underlying ethnic and religious tension persisted, underscoring the enduring legacy of the war.